Good morning. I hope you had a great weekend. When we left off with our penguin friends, the Admiral had just given Mr. Popper an offer to take the penguins to the North Pole and try to establish a penguin colony there. And a movie producer named Mr. Klein had offered them a contract in the movies. And the Poppers had decided they would rather send the penguins to the North Pole, but not until they make a short movie of them in New York. So here's the Admiral, Mr. Klein, Mr. Popper, and the penguins. The next day, the cameramen arrived to make the picture of the penguins doing their tricks. It was arranged that the Poppers should stay in New York just long enough to see the expedition off. Meanwhile, in the harbor, the great sailing ship of Admiral Drake was being made ready for its long trip north. Every day, huge boxes of supplies of all sorts were hustled on board. The most comfortable quarters on the ship were turned over to the penguins who were the cause of the voyage. Captain Cook was already quite familiar with the ship since it was the same one the Admiral had sailed to the South Pole where Captain Cook had often seen it. Greta, too, had seen vessels of its kind. The two of them were kept very busy showing and explaining everything to Nelson, Columbus, Louisa, Jenny, Scott, Magellan, Adelina, Isabella, Ferdinand, and Victoria. The sailors all took the greatest delight in watching the curious little birds at their explorations. "It looks like this will be a pretty lively trip," they would say. "These Popper penguins certainly live up to their reputation." But at last everything was ready, and the day came when the Poppers were to go down and say goodbye. Bill and Janey ran all over the ship and did not want to leave, and it was time to draw up the gangplank. The Admiral shook hands with them and Mrs. Popper and thanked them for having helped to train the extraordinary penguins that were to be a real contribution to science. Mr. Popper had gone down below to say a private farewell to the birds. All that kept him from breaking down completely was the knowledge that what he was doing was best for them too. First he said goodbye to all the younger penguins, then to Greta, who had saved Captain Cook. And last of all he leaned over and said a special goodbye to Captain Cook, who had come and made life so different for Mr. Popper. Then he wiped his eyes, straightened his back, and went up on deck to say goodbye to Admiral Drake. "Goodbye, Admiral Drake," he said. "Goodbye," repeated the Admiral. "But what do you mean? Aren't you coming with us?" "Me? Go with you to the North Pole?" "Why, of course, Popper." "But how could I go with you? I'm not an explorer or a scientist. I'm only a house painter." "You're the keeper of the penguins, aren't you?" roared the Admiral. "Man alive, aren't those penguins the reason for this whole expedition? And who's going to see that they're well and happy if you're not along? Go put on one of those fur suits like the rest of us. We're pulling anchor in a minute." "Mama!" shouted Mr. Popper to Mrs. Popper, who had already gone up the gangplank. "I'm going too! I'm going too! Admiral Drake says he needs me. Mama, do you mind if I don't come home for a year or two?" "Oh, as to that," said Mrs. Popper, "I'll miss you very much, but we have money to live on for a few years, and in winter it'll be much easier to keep the house tidy without a man sitting around all day. I'll be getting back to Stillwater. Tomorrow's the day for the meeting of the Ladies' Aid and Missionary Society, and I'll be just in time. So goodbye, my love, and good luck." "Goodbye and good luck," echoed the children. And the penguins, hearing their voices, scuttled up on deck and stood there beside the Admiral and Mr. Popper. Then they solemnly lifted their flippers and waved as the great ship moved slowly down the river toward the sea. Well, that's the end of the book. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm glad we got to finish this book together, even though we started it before you started doing e-learning at home. We have a great week ahead of us, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Bye.